But I don't want to waste any more time there because we definitely want to hear Tim tonight. I think everybody knows Tim. If you've been on the repeater at all and in traffic, you've probably asked Tim a whole bunch of questions. You might have even accused him of slowing down your way home. But Tim's a great guy. Tim K4RA is going to talk tonight on emergency equipment. I'm not going to take any more time, so let's welcome Tim. Thank you.
Probably need lights, so you can see, you can kill that. Fred, lights, please. Lights. Good evening. Good evening. I want to start out with a question. Sure you don't want. I was going to say, can you guys hear me in the back? No. No. No? No. No? Wow. All right, now can you hear me in the back? Yeah. Okay, that's better. All right, so I want to start out with a question. How many of you would consider yourself at least slightly prepared if life were to change? Okay, 1, 2, maybe 20 or 30, right? 20 or 30. So that means you have some sort of water, you have some sort of food, you have maybe backup power, maybe something, right? Okay. Did everybody get a copy of the handout? It looks a single page. Yeah, looks like that. Why should I? Emergency preparedness. Why should I bother? There should be copies floating around. If you don't have one, there should be a pile of extras someplace around. If you don't have one, pick one up. It's an article I wrote a couple of years ago for a magazine that gets distributed free in the Woodstock area. Called Christian Community News. It's put together by a friend of ours, a lady that goes to church with us at Fellowship Bible Church, and she runs this nonprofit called Papa's Pantry, which helps people with food and clothing and writing resumes and all sorts of stuff. But she also publishes this magazine, and a couple of years ago she asked me if I'd be interested in writing a column. So for the last few years, I've been writing a column, and so now she's doing them every other month. We try to cover a different topic. So if you go, I should have put that, oh, you know what, it's on that bottom of that handout. It's papaspantry.org. If you go there, there's a link for Christian Community News. If you click on that link, you can look at all the back issues in there. And since about September of 2013, there should be an emergency preparedness column in there, talking about water, about food, about generators, about fire extinguishers, about all kinds of stuff. I was hoping to have a handful of magazines for you guys this month, or tonight, but they just got done distributing all the magazines and they put them all out, so I didn't have enough to grab copies. This month's issue is about active shooter. You guys have all heard about active shooter. What do you do if somebody comes into your place where you are and starts shooting people? What do you do? And there are some things you can do about that, besides packing heat. So, of course, that's the best idea. Most of you know I'm a firearms instructor, and of course I advocate doing something proactive. Okay, so there's a number of things I want to talk about tonight. We don't have a lot of time. The original topic said soup to nuts about emergency preparedness, and that was a little bit tongue-in-cheek because for us to cover that, we'd be here for a week, right? So we're going to be kind of an inch deep and a mile wide and cover some individual areas and kind of give you some background and a little bit on those areas, and then hopefully that will get you thinking. That the whole idea here is that you each look at your own personal situation at home or at work or in the car, because all those are different, and think about what you could do in the event that something that you now enjoy, like electricity, like fresh water, like eating 3 times a day, if any of those things were to change, what can you do about it, right? What do we do right now about that? We get in the car and we drive to Publix or Kroger and we buy whatever we want, and everything's fine. Well, remember about 2 years ago this month, we had that nasty little snowstorm that hung around for about a week, and we had snow and ice all over the roads, and some people spent upwards of a day in their car because they couldn't get home. Anybody not remember that? Some of the guys from maybe Arizona or Texas that weren't here missed that little fun event. So those kind of things are the reason that we try to think ahead. Emergency preparedness is not a check the box. It's not, I did that one time, put it aside, I'm done, I never have to think about it again. It's not that at all. It's a mindset that has to kind of be in the back of your mind all the time. So if you're going to have some sort of reserve at home or in the car or wherever you are, you have to think, what do I need? How much do I need? And what do I do about rotation? Right? Because if you go and buy a bunch of extra food, let's just say food, you have a particularly favorite item you want to buy, and you go buy a bunch of extra and you put it on a shelf someplace, and about 5 years from now you're going to go, oh yeah, I've got that extra food, and if I ever need it, it's there. And then you go to use it, and it's bad. So it didn't do you any good because you spent money on it, but it went bad before you could use it. So we have to get into a whole mindset of, if we're going to have extra food, which is great, we want to do that, we also have to remember to rotate and move it through so you use it up and replace it, so that when you do need it, it's there and it's fresh and it's actually consumable and worth something. So a couple of areas, I want to talk about. One is the why bother, right? Why should I do this? Why is this important to me? And why should I even invest my time and my money in preparing for something that may never happen in my lifetime, right? I run into those people all the time, and they say, well, that'll never happen. I'll just go to Publix, so I'll just go to Kroger and get whatever I need. Well, hopefully that thing that happened 2 years ago can remind you that those stores aren't always available. You can't get there, and if you could get there, the shelves may be empty because the trucks can't get there to restock. In the article, I talk a little bit about just-in-time delivery. A lot of companies have gone to that just-in-time delivery model where they don't stock a whole warehouse full of parts to make something anymore. They order it and they have it delivered right before they need it, which is great. It saves them a lot of money in inventory. It saves Kroger and Publix a lot of money. They don't have a big warehouse right here. They get the deliveries as they need them. Well, you have a disruption of any sort in the transportation system, and that whole model goes out the window. Now the shelves are empty, and everybody is looking for milk, bread, eggs, and batteries. And what's the one other big thing?
Beer.
Toilet paper, okay? Try running out of toilet paper. You're going to be hating life, right? Okay, so all of those things can easily be stocked up ahead of time. Okay, so the why bother is because it may be important to you at some point if you want to eat and drink and continue on, and be happy and marry and all that stuff, right? You can get by without food for a couple of weeks if you had to, right? Nobody's going to want to do that, but you could. You can only get by for a few days without drinking water. So you really need to think about what can you do to have a supply of drinking water. Now, if your house runs on a well, that's great. But if the power goes out, how are you going to get the water out of the ground? Now, I don't think there are too many people that have those old-fashioned wells where you have to go out there and pump the handle to get the water out of the ground. So that means you need to have some sort of a power source to run the pump motor, right, to get the water out of the ground. But at least you have water if you can get to it, right? Those of us that live in suburbia, the city takes a very dim view if we try to drill a well in Roswell, right? They would not like the competition. So that means we have to do something else. So with water, there's a number of things we can do. A couple of things that I've done are get 55-gallon drums. You get food grade 55-gallon drums and put water in that. We have a couple of those. And the other thing you can do is a filter. So this happens to be my go bag out of my truck. So I've got all sorts of goodies in there. The filter's not very big. There's a whole lot smaller ones. You can get really small ones. This is called a life straw. It's about 1 inch in diameter and about just under 1 foot long. It's a little personal filter. You can stick it in a stream and suck right through it, and it filters out all the bad stuff that's going to make you sick. Right? I'm sorry? No guarantees in Flint, Michigan. Those folks are in big trouble for what they did. Can't believe they didn't actually test that water before they hooked it up to the city water supply. But a filter like this has this particular one, there's some that have paper filters. This one actually has a ceramic filter in it, and it will filter thousands of gallons of water. Thousands. So, it may take you a little while. You're not gonna feed an army, with this, but you can feed a family of 4 or 5 or 6 and have enough water. You basically spend a couple minutes pumping and you get a liter of water. So probably a liter about every minute or two. You can screw a big Nalgene bottle on the bottom, like this, screws right into the bottom of that. You can got a hose and you can pump. So any stream becomes a water source. So that's an option. Storing water at home is an option. But again, that water is going to go stale at some point or start to grow, and you don't want to be having water with mold in it. So now you have to do something about that. So don't bleach in there or just rotate it every once in a while.
So what about boiling?
Boiling water works too. But what if you don't have a way to boil? I mean, that's another tool, another thing that you have that you want to be able to make sure you can do. Food, you want to be able to warm it up, but if the power's out and you have an electric range, well, then what do? So everything you have to think of a backup plan for. If my electricity goes out, let's see, what does that affect? Obviously lights, heat, cooking, conveniences, air conditioning maybe in the summertime. So then you start thinking about ways to substitute for that. Okay, everybody says, well, I'll just get a generator. We're going to talk about generators last because that could be a whole day discussion right there. A lot of issues. It's not just as complex. It's not just as simple as running down to Home Depot, buying a generator, and you're done. You have to hook it up. You have to make sure that if the power comes back on while you're doing that, you don't have those two things feeding each other, or there will be a fire, and you will not like the outcome. You have to decide how big a generator and all that kind of stuff. So let's put the generator kind of toward the end. But the story, or the moral of the story here, is everything that you have and enjoy, like electricity, what happens if it goes away? You could live quite easily or quite happily without electricity. It's pretty easy to do without once you plan ahead. Do I have a light? Do I have candles? Do I have something to at least be able to see what I'm doing at night? How do I cook? Well, there's a whole bunch of different ways to do that. You can use something small and portable, like a jet boil, like this. Runs on a little butane cylinder, little, but it's 4 inches in diameter, but you can get big ones. So this will boil a liter of water in about 4 or 5 minutes. So you can make all sorts of meals with that. This actually comes, they make these now, the same company makes this with a coffee press. So you can cook dinner and make your coffee. All kinds of great stuff. They've got big bowls, you can make stew, you can make all kinds of stuff. So there are portable solutions. How many people have camping equipment? Sleeping bags, Coleman stove. Man, look at that. At least three-quarters of you have some sort of camping equipment. Well, guess what? That immediately transfers and applies to emergency preparedness. If you have a sleeping bag, you're not going to freeze. If you have a tent, if you're outside, if the house for some reason is uninhabitable, you've got at least some shelter. The shelter is one of the pillars of survival, right? Shelter, water, food are your three major things. Electricity is down the list of ways, even though we're kind of spoiled we get used to all our modern conveniences. But if you've got those first three things, you're good. So for tonight, I'm going to kind of assume that we have shelter taken care of, and that your house is in one piece and you can stay there. You may not have power, you may not have water, but you're still going to be staying there. So the first thing we got to do is come up with water. So think about your situation. How would you do water? You can get if you know something's going to happen, like a hurricane is coming and you can see it coming, you know it's going to probably affect a big area. We don't really have that problem so much here like they do in coastal cities, maybe Savannah, even Florida, and those places. You can get a bladder for your bathtub that sits in the bathtub. It'll hold about 100 gallons of water. So if you think the water's going to go out, fill up your bathtub with water. At least it gives you, a bunch that you can work off for a couple of days. You can use barrels like I talked about, or one thing that is very handy is bottled water, right? Now you can buy all sorts of different bottled water, but a friend of ours is a water guy, and he goes around to water bottling plants like these guys, like he worked for Coke and Dasani and all that, and he is pretty much a bottled water expert. And I was talking to him, and what he told me was this Nestle water, which you can buy at Sam's, Costco, BJ's Wholesale Club, all those places, buy a flat of this for about $4. They're about 13 cents a bottle, and he claimed that this is among the best waters you can get. The purest, the cleanest, the best tasting, all that good stuff, for very little money, 13 cents or so a bottle, and these bottles are very thin, and they are easily recyclable. So at our house, we have about 1,200 of these, about 35 flats of water that we constantly rotate. When they come in, I take a Sharpie. When I go get them, I write on there with a Sharpie, And I write the date, the month, and the year, so I know when I got them, and they go to the back of the pile. And then we use these all the time. When my wife and I leave, we usually grab a bottle and throw it in the car, and so we have something to drink as we're driving down the road. It takes us a while. So the flat of water that I put in the fridge, we have a refrigerator downstairs for beverages, and I put a new flat in that fridge today, and it had a May of 2014 date on it. So that's how long it's taken me to burn through 1,200 bottles of water. So when I buy the new ones, they go into the back of the pile, and I scooch the flats forward. And so I'm constantly rotating those bottles of water. So May of 2014, and that water is perfectly fine. That's actually what this is right here. Well, that's a good question. Cool and dark, it'll last quite a while. If you're not in a cool, hopefully it's in the lowest level of your house or someplace that's cool, it will last quite a while. If it's in the sun, not long at all. So even if it's through a window and it's the window shining in there. So I have the room that I have is a former sauna. I don't use the sauna, so I blacked out the window and I've got all my stuff piled in there.
What happens to the water? How does it go bad?
It starts to grow mold, right? So even if the bottle is sealed, at first it'll go stale, and it'll be okay, it'll be usable, but it won't taste great. It'll taste a little flat, and then they will start to go. Now, almost all of these water companies have gotten rid of the BPA out of the plastic in the bottles, so you shouldn't have problems with stuff leaching into the water if it sits in there for a while. The older bottles, you couldn't really leave the water in the bottle more than about 6 months, or it started to leach chemicals into the water, and then you have the Michigan problem, although it wasn't lead. So this is an option. And this is portable. The problem with the 55-gallon drums of water is take 55 times 8. What is that, about 400 pounds? Something like that. You're not going to just pick that up and throw it up on your shoulder and take it with you, right? So having those 6-gallon jerry cans with water in them, that's a great idea. If you had to evacuate your house, you can put that in the car and go. And at least you'd have some water to get you through wherever you were going, right? Especially for those 17-hour deals in the car that some of my friends did because they tried to get from work to home and got stuck on the side of the road and couldn't get anywhere. So water is hugely important. So think about your situation. Now you need a minimum of 1 gallon per person per day of fresh water, drinking water, to drink, to cook with, to clean, and maybe do a quick sponge bath every once in a while. So a minimum of 1 gallon, and 2 gallons is better, is much more realistic. So you figure how many people in your household times how long you want to hold out for, just say a month. So take the number of people in your house times 2 for 2 gallons a day times 30 days, and it adds up pretty quickly. So the 350 or so gallons of water I have at home will only last my wife and I a little, 2 months, maybe, right? Which is pretty good for 2 people. So it would have to be a pretty big event for us to not be able to get anywhere for 2 months. And the Chattahoochee River is close by, although I would be trusting this, but I'm not sure about drinking Chattahoochee River water. You get my drift.
Well, does that filter have to be replaced once in a while?
Once in a while, it comes out of there, and there's actually a little scraper. This little scraper, you can actually scrape it, and it also comes with a little Scotch-Brite pad, so you can actually scrub the outside of it because all the particulates come in from the outside, and then the clean water comes out of the middle. So everything is on the outside, and so you can scrub it off and you reuse it. You scrub it off and reuse it. So but eventually, if you...
What about the non-particulate bacteria?
Well, this is small enough that it filters a lot of that out. But eventually, yeah, you're going to have to replace it. That's why it's always good to have a spare filter. If you're going to, you can literally stick this thing in a mud puddle. And we've actually done that, tested it. Here's the end, and then this end goes to the filter, right? So all you need is enough space to stick this thing anywhere under the water, in the mud, whatever, and it'll suck out. Obviously, mud's going to clog up this filter a lot quicker, so try not to do that. But anyway, there's a whole bunch of different filters out of the market now. There's a number of companies that all have 2 micron, 1 micron, half micron. Half micron is really good. That's going to filter out all the stuff that would make you sick, and get you to a place that you can have good, decent water to drink and cook food with and all that. Now, if you can boil the water, that's great. That kills all the critters, but that may not fix the taste, right? There's also iodine tablets. You can put iodine tablets in the water, but I'm not a big fan of that. Number one, it doesn't taste good. And number two, you actually have to leave it sit in the water for a number of hours for it to actually do anything with the water. Most of us get too impatient, we drink the water and then get sick, and then we blame the iodine for not working. So it's just a whole lot quicker and easier just to do something that's going to mechanically filter the water. So anyway, have some water, whatever it is, however much you can have. If you live in a condo and you don't have a lot of storage room, then maybe it's just a filter and something to put the clean water in. So once you get it, you have some way to transport it. So remember, you only have a few days without fresh water. Okay, so that brings us to food. What are you going to eat? Right? So if the power goes out, what's the first food you're going to eat if the power goes out?
Beer.
The beer. Yeah, we said the beer. Okay, well, I guess that's a good one, because where I was going with that is the food that's in the refrigerator, because that's the first thing that's going to spoil. Once your fridge quits and it starts getting warm in there, it'll stay cool for a couple of hours if you can keep the kids from standing there with the door open looking and see what they can eat, because the light will be off. So refrigerator first, freezer second, and then everything that's non-refrigerated third, right? Because that's going to last. So what are the two best foods for emergencies? Okay, beans, that's a good, and there's a number of varieties of that. Well, okay, we'll come back to that. The two best foods, peanut butter, right? A la Sam's, two big jugs. I bought this in November of 2014. All right, and the single best food that you can get for emergencies, honey. Okay, this may be the most perfect food there is. Because why? Why? No refrigeration, doesn't spoil, lasts a long time. You don't have to do anything to it. It's always ready to eat. Okay, so possibly the perfect food. Yes, sir?
Also antiseptic.
Antiseptic, yeah. Okay, and you're encouraged, the purists encourage you to eat local honey from where you're from, because it's made by local bees from local flowers, and that would help you with local allergies and stuff like that. So unfortunately, we can't buy local honey at Sam's, which is where I got this, but it's good stuff.
Hey,
So,
Tim,
yeah.
Tim, now there's raw honey and then there's like pasteurized or processed honey. Is there a concern from a prep standpoint of using raw honey that hasn't been processed or pasteurized?
Okay, and the question is there a difference between raw honey and processed honey, something like this? I'm not a honey expert. I would say that the raw honey would be great if you probably doesn't have the shelf life. It's probably not going to last as long. It's going to crystallize. But the good part about honey is if it does crystallize, what do you do? What do you do to get it back to looking like this?
Heat it.
Just warm it up. Not microwave. Warm it up in a pot of water, not too hot, and just let it sit in there for an hour or so, and it will decrystallize and look like this again. If you get these jugs too hot, they turn into a blob. All the form goes out of them, and they get all one big round cylinder. And if you keep heating it, you now have honey soup, okay? So in the water, so don't do that. So, and don't microwave them, because these containers get hot and they immediately rupture if you put this in the microwave, and now you have a puddle of honey in your microwave. It's not good. Okay, it is not good. Peanut butter lasts a long time, quite a long time. Again, if you keep it at a decent temperature, like under 70, 5 years, maybe 10 years.
Twinkies also.
There's no food in a Twinkie yet.
Whatever that. Yes, sir.
I had peanut butter in Scout Camp in 1974 that was for the Korean War surplus.
Okay. All right. So a long time.
That was in a can.
Long time.
Scouts.
I have seen a packaged Twinkie with mold on it, so don't put all your hope on the.
Well, Twinkies. I have a Twinkie story I should tell you, but it's Twinkies last an incredibly long time. You've all heard the joke about if you take a Twinkie and stick it on a metal railing outside, the metal railing will rust and be gone, and the Twinkie will still be there. Okay, because it's so full of preservatives. So not exactly the most healthy food, but I mean Twinkies are we'll just leave it at that. Okay, so water, got to do something about water. Food, obviously, something that is going to last a long time is a great emergency preparation thing because you don't have to think about it a whole lot. The key is when you go to the store to buy something, do I have that in my emergency supplies? And if you do, take the new one and put it in the emergency supplies and grab the older one, and bring it up to the kitchen and eat it. That way you have a rotation going and things, you don't have to worry about, oh, it's 26 years past the expiration date, is it still good, right? My parents, when we moved my parents out of their house in Minneapolis, my niece and I were down cleaning out the grocery shelves that my dad had built down in the basement, and we found 2 cans of, the pie filling, the cherry pie filling that you put on top of pies. We found 2 of those cans from 1965 down in there, and they were not bulged. They were still probably okay. They went. We didn't risk that one. But anyway, canned goods last a long time. There is an expiration date because they have to put one. That doesn't mean that the day after the expiration date they're junk. Most times food will be good for 2 or 3 years past that expiration date, especially if you keep the temperature reasonable. If it's hot, forget it. If it's in the trunk of your car, all bets are off. It may not make it to the expiration date. So all that stuff, if you rotate it and you keep it reasonably cool, it's going to last a long time. So whatever you're going to eat, beef stew, cans of soup, all that kind of stuff is great to have in your emergency rations. But when you need to use it, someone comes over, you all of a sudden, oh, unexpected, we got to have some extra, use it, but then replace it so that you rotate all those food stores. A while back, Kroger had spaghetti on sale. The boxes of spaghetti, yay long and this big. I mean, one of those will probably feed me 6 times. One of those boxes, they were $1. So I bought 10 boxes. I've got 10 boxes of spaghetti in my storeroom, and that stuff's going to last a long time. They also had spaghetti sauce on sale, so I bought a few bottles of that, and you're going to run out of sauce long before you run out of spaghetti because it's such the ratio is high for the sauce. But you go to Sam's, you buy the big bottles. Of course, you go to Sam's, they sell you 3 of the bottles. You can't just buy one. They come in a 3-pack. But, that I write the date on there, stick them in the shelf, and rotate the older stuff out, and it works great. That's a quick, easy meal, good carbs. So, again, times how many people you have to feed. So figure out how much that is. And you don't have to start out and spend $5,000 or something on food. Go and just every time you go to the store, add a few cans of things that you use anyway, and put them aside so that you keep them, and then remember to rotate them. It really helps a lot if you use a Sharpie and write the date, at least the month and the year that you got them, so that you have some clue. If you try to go by the expiration date, that may or may not, it may be okay, but it's a lot easier if you just write the date that you bought them and then rotate the stock that way. You can do a number of other things for food. Obviously there's all the stuff you normally have in your pantry, but I'll tell you this, my wife and I were at a party a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking to this couple who we had not met, and somehow or other emergency preparedness came up, and we started talking about that, and I said, well, how much food do you have in your pantry? And they looked at me completely baffled. Well, none. We shop every day because we buy fresh, right? And I said, well, what happened if you can't get to the store tomorrow? And they looked very perplexed. They went, well, I get in the car and I drive to the store. I said, well, no, what if you can't get there? Never had entered their mind. Okay, so they shop every day. Well, what happens if you have that mindset? Cooking fresh is great, don't get me wrong, love that, but what happens if you can't get to the store? Now you're kind of like, oh, well, now what do I do? And you're going to eat every piece of candy in the house, you're going to eat every cracker you have, you're going to eat because there's nothing else. And then when that runs out, what are you going to do?
Coming to your house.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's what my neighbors all said when I tried to have this discussion with them. I said, what are you going to do? And they said, we're coming to your house. And I said, don't make me make that decision. I am a firearms instructor. Okay? There's a reason for that. There's a cause and effect there, right? So, in your car, what happens? Okay, for for you ladies, and those of you that have YLs at home, women always wear the high heel open toe shoes because they're going to work, right? And then what happens if the snowstorm occurs on the way home? You going to walk any distance in high heel open toe shoes? Probably not. So have another pair of shoes in the car, right? Something like a jacket would be great, gloves would be nice, but how about some shoes you can actually walk in? Most of us guys have fairly functional shoes, but if you're trying to wear dress shoes with leather bottoms and you're stepping on snow and ice, holy cow, you're going to break your neck, right? No traction there. So if the weather's getting bad, like now we're predicting snow, right? How many of you have a decent pair of walking shoes in the car? Gloves, jacket, maybe a hat, something to keep you warm if you slid into the ditch and you couldn't get out, or you got stuck behind somebody else and you just can't go anywhere and you had to walk some distance. Could you do that on the way home tonight? I see a lot of, you know, the gears are turning. And that's the whole idea here, is think about your situation. What happens if I don't get to where I'm going? Cell phone charger in your car? Does everybody have a cell phone charger in your car? Right? The batteries, the auxiliary battery packs now, I was at Fry's the other day, they are getting bigger, more capacity, and they're getting smaller physically, but the capacity is getting bigger, and the prices are dropping like a rock. I don't want to say how much because my wife is sitting in the back of the room, but I bought her one for Christmas. Bought her a 10,000 milliamp hour, right? So
Jeez.
10 amp hour battery. The thing is kind of like a pancake. And the prices were coming down. So you can still spend a lot of money if you buy the big name brands, but some of these other ones, you can get a really nice backup battery that will last quite a while, charge your phone a couple times if you don't have that cigarette lighter plug. So,
$13 on Amazon.
and some of them $13, depending on the capacity and so forth.
10,000.
10,000, okay, very good. The other thing that came out, this company called Eton has been around for a while. They sell a number of these different emergency radios. So, has an antenna, has the 7 channels of weather band. You can turn that on, see what's going on with weather. Has a little solar panel on the top, as if that's going to help. But it does have a rechargeable battery in it. So you can either plug in a USB and charge it, or if you have time, you can crank and charge it. Now, this also has a USB output. So if you didn't have a charger for your phone, you didn't have an extra battery, you didn't have a way to make that phone work, and you needed to make a phone call, you can do something like this and charge it manually.
Stay warm while you're doing it.
And stay warm while you're doing it, and burn more calories, so you'll be even more hungry. But again, it's another way of providing power. Solar panels, Ian.
Tim, does that also have AM or FM broadcast band receive on it?
It has, this one has
40-meter band, all right.
Not
Only for
quite.
you, Jay.
This one is weather, but there are some that have AM, FM, and weather. I bought it because of the crank charger, just because it was a great idea. There are other options. Some of these solar panels, here's a couple that I have. There's a 7-watt solar panel, and that will charge a set of AA batteries in a few hours. So AA rechargeables, of course. So you can charge that, and then this acts as a battery pack. So you can charge your phone out of here. You can charge your phone directly from this if it's in the sun, which will take a couple hours to charge. This is a 13-watt panel. That will charge that little one even quicker. Or you've got a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, which will run a laptop. It'll run a bunch of others, more capacity, USB output, and a power inverter on it as well. So this is a handy little deal. So if you're going to be out hiking, they make this thing so you can hang this on your pack. So as you're walking, you're charging, right, if you're out in the sun. So that works. There's a whole bunch of these kind of things coming out as well. And I hope to have access to another solar panel system and battery arrangement that the Aries guys heard about last week. Hope to have that available for us to start testing. I've got a new company that's getting into this market. They've actually been in the battery market a long time, but they now have a 3-foot by 6-foot solar panel that puts out 250 watts. So
Wow.
it's flexible. It's not really, you can't roll it up, but it's flexible. So you can transport it. And I'm going to see if I can get some of those for us to test at some of our field days where we don't have ready access to power. This one's called Eton, E-T-O-N. They make a whole bunch of, this is actually a little bit on the large size. They make them about half this size. They make some of them, this has it actually has a flashlight on it as well. So you can, you got white, you got red, flashing and all that kind of stuff. So they make a smaller one that's more kind of like that with a crank on the side. What is this called? I don't
Bless
know.
you.
Amazon.
Yeah, FRX3. Frank Romeo X-Ray 3. But then again, this company has got all kinds of stuff. You can find these guys everywhere. Cheaper Than Dirt has them. Amazon has them. Eddie Bauer sells them. I mean, just about everybody sells these guys. I've seen at least a dozen styles of this kind of thing. Some have AM, FM, some are just weather band. All of them have the crank. So you can, whatever. And so their capacity may vary, but at least gives you some ability. If you ran out of everything else, you ran out of batteries, you didn't have a rechargeable, you didn't have a solar panel, you didn't have whatever, you're down to cranking, well, at least you can, get something going, right? Yes, okay. All right, 10 minutes. So, talk a little bit more about food. Obviously, having the food that you eat every day is great. Dehydrated foods. They're in these bags. This company called Mountain House started out making food for hikers. So you can put these in your pack, and all they need is a cup of boiling water. So if you have one of these, you have half a bottle of water, dump it in here, 3 minutes, it's boiling, cut the top off of here, and this actually has a zipper, it has a Ziploc kind of closure. Tear the top off, pour a cup of hot boiling water in, close the seal, and let it sit for 10 minutes, and you have a hot meal for 1.5 or 2 servings, depending on the container. All kinds of great stuff. Pasta primavera. This one is chicken teriyaki with rice. There's a whole bunch of other deals. Cheaper Than Dirt. I just bought this last month. Cheaper Than Dirt has a bucket of those kind of meals. 12 pouches, 32 servings for $63. So if you didn't want to have to go through all this and get honey and peanut butter and everything else that your spaghetti or whatever else you want to use as emergency food, get this and you're done. This food, if you keep it cool and a decent temperature, will last upwards of 25 years. The other company that I deal with and use is Wise. They're out of Utah, and they do the same thing. This bucket has 60 pouches in it. So it's about 150 to 200 bucks for this, but you've got 60 meals. Some breakfast, some lunch, some dinner. They have different combinations. But you do that, and you're good, right? You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to mess with anything, as long as you can, you're happy with what's in the pouches. So in my go bag that sits in my truck, I have a couple bottles of water. I shove about 4 or 5 bottles like this in here. I've got about 3 or 4 of these meals. I could be out for a week just on what's in this pouch, just in this bag, if I'm by myself, right? And a whole bunch of other handy goodies. I know there's a bunch of people in this room that have Bofang radios, and there are some people that disparage the Bofangs in lieu of the bigger, more famous companies. But I'll tell you, for an emergency radio with antenna connectors and having an emergency radio in your bag when you need it, you can't beat a $38 radio, right? You program it with your computer for ease and accuracy, but have a radio in there, mag mount antenna, so you can, if you have to, throw it up on top of somebody else's car. If you have to get into someone else's car, you get some range, right? Granted, it's only 4 watts, but it sure beats yelling and screaming and hollering, especially if your cell phone doesn't work. Anybody in that snowstorm a couple years ago, did anybody try to use your cell phone?
I
Yeah?
had 2 cell phones. I had a Sprint and an AT&T.
Did either one of them work?
And I was in Alpharetta, and both of them were locked out. No channel.
No, right. So during that event, Mr. Lemon, WK4U in the back here, was acting as Dispatch Central for a bunch of people. You may have heard him on the radio. I think Lori was the beneficiary of that, and a few of you others were. He was watching his computer at home, telling everybody where you could go and which roads were open and how to get home. So for those of us that are already hams, it's not a big surprise, right? We use a ham radio for communication all the time. It's the people that were trying desperately to use their cell phone and couldn't get a call through. Might have got a text message through. I had text messages go through delayed by 10 or 15 minutes, but they did eventually go through because it uses a lot less bandwidth. Anyway, all kinds of great stuff in a go bag. Everybody's going to develop your own, whatever you think is necessary. A lot of people ask me if I have guns in my go bag, and the answer is no, because this stays in my truck all the time, and I don't want to risk that in there. I do have other things that are useful in the event you need to have a tool, have a nice sized knife. Always carry a pocket knife with me, but between rope and paracord is extremely handy. It's parachute cord is how it got its start, and now you can buy it in every color of the rainbow, but it's great if you need to make a clothesline, you need to tie something down, you need to do whatever. This stuff is just super handy to have if you've got a bag. If you're going to be out and about, it's always good to have a first aid kit. Now yours may not need to be this big. I've got all sorts of stuff in here. I'm a former EMT, but that way, at least if you are stuck in the car and you cut yourself or somebody else cuts themselves, at least to have some bandages and something to do at least basic things. You're not going to do surgery, obviously, but you're going to do basic things to the level of your training. Yes, sir.
You mentioned keeping water in your truck. Now, is that ever a problem when it gets below freezing? Because we don't have a garage, so my car stays parked out front.
Yep.
Am I risking keeping water, freezing and expanding and
Well,
bursting?
if they're in these bottles, you'll notice the way the bottles are contoured. If they freeze, the bottle's is gonna poof out, but it's not gonna burst, right? So I'm not sure how many cycles you could go through before the bottle finally gives out, but I mean, if that was the case, just change it out every once in a while. Every few months, just change out those bottles of water.
Probably the summertime.
And the summertime would be worse, where it's getting hot all the time. But they'll last actually quite a while. I was surprised. I put one of these in the freezer to cool it down quicker, and I forgot about it. And all it did was just bubble out all of the surfaces. It kind of made it into just a big balloon, but it didn't burst. So the worst case is that you'd have to unthaw it if you wanted to drink it. Right, so you'd have to do something to warm it up enough where you could make it liquid again. Yeah.
For food, what about MREs?
MREs are okay that first day or so, and then you're sick of them. If you've ever had an MRE, they're not very exciting. You wonder how our troops survive on the darn things because they're just not very exciting, and they're not cheap either. If you try to buy them at local stores, you're going to pay in that $7 or $8. You basically pay about the same. I was looking at Dick's the other day. We were at Dick's, and I was looking. They had these. They were about $8 for one of these packages. If you buy them, you can buy 12 of them for $63. So do that math. It's a lot less than $8.
And they're heavy.
And
MREs.
MREs, yeah, they're dense, right? So they're heavy. These are actually pretty light. This weighs well under a pound, right? And so granted, you have to have water to make it work, but I would go for this every day of the week. These are actually really good. I had these down at the hunting camp, and I thought, well, let me try these and just see how good they are and what they taste like. Are they meals ready to eat? MRE is a meal ready to eat.
It's military field rations.
Right, military rations. So anyway, these kind of things, the Wise food is really good as well. There's all kinds of varieties of different food. So the bottom line here is whatever you're doing, wherever you are, have a backup plan, right? So water, food, hopefully shelter you got already handled, and then electricity. Generators is a whole other topic. If you're thinking about doing that, ask somebody first because the size is going to matter based on what you're trying to run. The fuel, you have to have fuel for it. Generator doesn't do you any good unless you have plenty of fuel to run that. So if it's gasoline, you got to rotate the gasoline too. So you're going to be dumping it in the car once in a while. Don't buy a diesel generator if you don't have a diesel vehicle, all right? Because you got to be able to get rid of that fuel somewhere. And so now it's just sitting there. So you can get propane or natural gas, but then you have to rotate those things through. I looked at some of the home size units that run on propane, and it's amazing how fast they'll burn through a cylinder of propane. The 40-pound cylinders, the ones that are this tall, they're twice as big as what would go on your grill. It burns through one of those in 2 hours. Okay, so can you imagine if you're trying to run that thing a whole day, how many of those 40-pounders you got to have sitting around? So it's great for running it for short periods of time. The other thing about generators is if your whole neighborhood is dark and you fire up the generator, guess where all the neighbors are going to come, right? It's going to be a beacon. And then when they get there, the next thing is, what have you got to eat, right? They're going to expect you to feed them as well. So a generator is very much a dual-edged sword, right? You're going to maybe help yourself out, but you're also going to advertise to the rest of the world that you have power and someone's going to try to steal it. Never fails that happens. So between having something ready in the car, having adequate water or availability of water, having some backup food, I buy stuff at Sam's Club in bulk. This is black beans, and I put them in these Mylar bags, which look like this, right? They're flat. So you put the beans in there, you put in some oxygen absorbers, which suck all the oxygen out of the air, which oxygen is what makes everything spoil. So if you get rid of the oxygen, these black beans will probably last 25 years in this bag if you don't break the seal on this bag. And you can see the texture of the beans because it sucked all the air basically into that oxygen absorber, right? So you can take supplies that you use every day, flour, sugar, beans, whatever, and buy a bigger quantity and pack it up in this stuff and then set it aside. So you can prepare ahead of time, little at a time. You don't have to start all at one time. Yes, Steve?
Where do you find the Mylar bags and the oxygen absorbers?
Amazon. Amazon has everything. And actually, they're not bad. You can get whatever size you want. You can get gallon size. You can get sandwich bag size, whatever you're trying to do. And then you can seal this with your iron. You set the iron on wool setting, and you can just, put this on a 2x4 or a piece of wood or something, and iron across the top of it. Or you can get a sealer, a heat sealer, which is what I have, which does it real quick and easy for you. But it's in there, and if you put the oxygen absorbers in there, it's going to suck all the oxygen out of the bag, and the stuff's going to last for a long time.
I was just going to say, chicken of the sea and tuna in the foil pouches is very cost effective and have 3-year shelf life and it's very good.
Chicken of the sea, tuna, in foil pouches, right? Long, good, decent shelf life. But again, it all should be rotated. These things, 25 years if you keep them cool. So not a whole lot of rotation necessary there. So if you're one of those people that doesn't want to have to keep up with all this stuff, just buy some of these and have some water, have a water supply and a way to heat. These things are great. These jet boils are absolutely fabulous. They'll boil a cup of water in about 3 minutes, dump it in there, 10 minutes later you got meal. Hot, warm meal that tastes good. So, yes, sir.
Do you want to drink water out of water heaters? Yes, no?
You can, but it doesn't taste good.
Okay.
It doesn't taste good. You can try filtering it, but inside a water heater is a rod called a getter, right? And that getter puts minerals in the water. So it doesn't taste, it's not going to kill you, it just doesn't taste good, right? So you can do that. Some people do that. I know somebody that installed a second water heater to be able to have twice as much capacity to do just that.
Oh, just for preparedness?
Yes.
Okay.
You can drink water out of your swimming pool if it's not a bromine pool.
People will offer you water often, so I wonder. You need to say, where did that come from?
Yeah, well, just a minute while I get out my life straw and I will, suck it through this.
Sometimes you do it, sometimes you don't.
Right. So it's just good to have a small filter. You can buy these filters for, Ian.
Iodine tablets, are those still useful for water purification?
They are still available. You can still buy them. I just don't like them because you have to leave them in the water for a number of hours for them to be effective.
Okay.
And when you're thirsty, you want to drink it now. That's why the filters are immediate. Once it comes out the other end of the filter, you're good to go. You can.
What about bleach?
Bleach works. Don't get scented bleach. A couple drops in a few gallons. It doesn't take much, but that will keep the mold from growing in the water if you're going to store it. It's not really a purification. I guess you could use it as that, but generally you put a little extra bleach in for long-term storage so it doesn't start to grow on you. You can get a little more shelf life out of it. Yes, sir.
With the water heaters, if it's an aluminum anode, you will get sick on the aluminum. It has to be magnesium.
Yeah, and I think most of them are, but I have seen aluminum ones.
Premium ones are magnesium.
It just doesn't taste good, though. I mean, I wouldn't, that's the last place I'm going to go for fresh water. That's why I have water stored and I have filters and all that stuff. I'd much rather do that and leave the hot water in the water heater. Yes?
with the jet boil, those use kind of a proprietary fuel cell or fuel cartridge. How many of those do you keep in stock, and are there other alternatives?
There are a number of other alternatives. If you have a Coleman camp stove, those work great. If you have a barbecue grill with a side burner, this is the little, they're not a proprietary. There's a bunch of companies that make this. This one is perfect because it fits inside. They make them 3 and 4 times this size. They make one of these butane things the same size as this.
So does the connector on the jet boil fit on the Coleman propane container?
No, these are for these butane cartridges, but it's not a proprietary. It's just a screw fitting, but it's much smaller than the Coleman, right? So this is just going to screw on here, and this goes on the bottom of this. And so you've got just you got an igniter and a little control how high the flame is.
Yeah, the idea is that's butane, not propane, right? Yeah.
It's butane. Yeah, it's butane. Not. This one's called Snow Peak. They make different mixtures. This is a general mix, but they make them for high altitude too. High altitude and cold, because when these get cold, they don't work as well. They have to vaporize the fuel to make it work, just like propane. But there's lots of options. I'm just saying that if you get something like this, it's portable, it works, it's easy. Almost anybody can figure out how to put it together and make it work in just a minute, right? It's quick. Yes, sir.
Have you ever used white gas?
You can use white gas is basically what Coleman fuel is. That's the same thing. That's kind of fallen out of favor, but you can do that. You can put those in Coleman stoves, the Coleman fuel stove. Coleman also makes the propane, which is easier. The little 1-pound cylinders, that's easier because the propane doesn't go bad in those cylinders because it's sealed. The gas has the same problem as gasoline and the Coleman fuel, that eventually it goes bad and you need to rotate it. There's not really much other place to get rid of that Coleman fuel except burning it. So, we done?
Thanks, sir.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Definitely with the inclement weather, there's supposed to be some incoming weather in North Georgia and tornado season, so I know I prepare, but not to this extent, so I think you've given us something all to think about. And normally we give our guest a plaque. Somehow the plaque went missing tonight, so we'll get that to you at the next meeting, but we appreciate it. Good topic. So.